Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Psalm chapter 1. That's a wisdom psalm. Psalm 1 serves as an introduction, in a sense, to all of the Psalms. I think it's placed carefully and thoughtfully at the very beginning of the book of Psalms. It is going to describe two types of people, the righteous and the wicked. The righteous are going to be seen in verses 1 through 3, the wicked in verses 4 through 5, and then verse 6 will be sort of a conclusion. It's, as I said earlier, it's a wisdom psalm. It's the kind of psalm, and remember how that you have, when you say wisdom, you almost think of the Proverbs. You don't usually think of the Psalms. Psalms are usually more about worship and feeling and passion. And wisdom we usually think of in the Proverbs, but there is wisdom in worship. And this psalm is going to remind us of that. It's going to remind us that what is right is also wise. We see that all throughout the Proverbs, but we see it here in this first psalm. Let's look at the psalm then. How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. Now, notice it starts off with a blessing, but blessed is the man who does not do some things. He doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. Notice the movement that's taking place in the first verse, but also the people that he's not like. He's not walking in the counsel of the wicked, or standing in the path of sinners, or sitting in the seat of scoffers. And we don't necessarily always associate, of course, wicked and sinners we usually associate together. And the word wicked is just a very basic Hebrew word, just bad. Um, but wicked sinners, but notice how scoffers is lumped in with that. And maybe it's a good reminder that in our scoffing, we don't want to, when we laugh, and be careful how you laugh, because you might be laughing at the wrong sort of thing. You might find yourself in bad company. Um, so we start off that way, but then his delight, this is the man who doesn't do that, the man who is blessed, his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates. So notice there's maybe a connection between delighting in the law and meditating in the law. That is, if you delight in the law, you'll be thinking about it. You're going to reflect on it. It's not just going to be something that's put on the back burner. And notice that goes throughout the day. In his law, he meditates day and night. There's a continuity and a continuation that is suggested there. And then verse 3, he will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and in whatever he does, he prospers. So verse 1 then started off with what this man who is blessed, what he doesn't do. Doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked, doesn't stand in the path of sinners, doesn't sit in the seat of scoffers. So speaks about what he doesn't do. Verse 2 describes what he does do. His delight is in the law of the Lord. He meditates upon that law day and night. And then finally, verse 3 talks about the result of what that will be. He will be like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit. Notice a tree. It takes a season for it to yield its fruit. It doesn't happen immediately. The leaf, and so notice the fruit is the good result. Its leaf does not wither, so it avoids the bad result. And then the conclusion, and in whatever he does, he prospers. Verse 4 now introduces our second section. It's as it speaks not of the righteous, but the wicked, and the wicked are not so. So everything that we read about the righteous, that does not apply to the wicked. But instead, we're given instead of being like a tree planted by rivers of water, here they are like chaff, which the wind drives away. And we have to explain this idea of chaff. Remember that this is an agricultural economy, and so what farmers would do, they would grow the grain throughout a season, um, and then at the harvest, they would take that grain, cut it down, and put it into a big pile. You can see the pile off to the right for our worker here. And what he would do is either he'd do it himself, or it's easier to get a beast of burden to carry something heavy, to pull something heavy over the chaff again and again and again. I'm not over the chaff, over the wheat, and it would break up, this heavy object would break up the kernels so that it would separate the wheat from the chaff, and it would be all ground up together. The chaff is like the husk of the wheat. The husk that is around the kernel is sort of protective, but also not very good to eat. It's not nourishing at all. And so what they would do is they would grind it all up. Then once it was ground up, our fearless farmer would then take, that chaff, and he'd take the whole mess. He'd start throwing it up in the air again and again and again. He's doing this here in this picture. And he does this in a windy area, usually up high, maybe on a hilltop, what's known as the threshing floor. And the wind is going to catch it all, and the grain, which is heavier, is just going to fall right back down to the ground. But the chaff is lighter, and the wind will catch it and blow it away. Now we see that the wicked, notice, they are like chaff, which the wind drives away. They're the useless part of the grain. They're the part that you don't want. They're the part that has no nourishment to them. Verse 5, therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. So notice two different phrases that describe the idea of judgment. For the first part, they won't stand in the judgment in itself. That is, they won't, when it says they won't stand in the judgment, doesn't mean they won't be judged. It means that when the judgment is concluded, they won't be standing. They won't be seen as having passed the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. So the first line of verse 5 is saying essentially the same thing as the second line. The wicked are the sinners. The judgment is the assembly. And so that explains the fate of the wicked. And then verse 6 is our conclusion. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way, remember, we started off about walking in the way. Which way are you walking? The Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. And the point is that there's coming a judgment, and the Lord knows. He is aware of how you are walking, how you are living, and the judgment will be accordingly. Now we come to the question, how can we apply this to our lives? How can I be like a tree that is planted by waters? I would suggest that we can start by looking at the one who was planted, really who was nailed to a tree, who was crucified on our behalf, so that we can be connected to him, because he is the righteous one. And through him, we can come to God in faith, believing, trusting, and then being connected to him. Jesus said, I am the vine, you are the branches, but only if you're connected to me.